A major blizzard is about to impact parts of the United States. Beyond the impacts in the Northeast, far-reaching impacts from cold air will also move in behind the storm. Thank you for joining me in this video. I'm about to start this one off by showing you a look at the jet stream dip that's going to bring in the blizzard and then the colder air that's going to really fill many zones behind it. Here we are taking a look at the flow of winds over North America, the jet stream flow expected as we go into the next couple of days. I want you to especially watch the U shape that forms in the jet stream going into Sunday, as well as the early part of Monday. Can you see it? There it is forming up right out of the central US and then dipping down into parts of the east. This is what you call a trough, which is when you get a significant pull of the jet stream coming on down in a U shape like this. On the leading edge of troughs in weather, that's where you tend to get low pressure to form. That's exactly what we're going to see forming along the leading edge of this one near the mid-Atlantic and the northeast coast by the end of Sunday. That means a blizzard in those zones as we go out of Sunday into Monday. I'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. One thing I'll also talk about more in detail in this video is the cold air that's going to be coming down on the larger scale as a result of this huge dip in the jet stream. While the incoming blizzard will mainly impact the east coast, the cool down behind it is what's going to be more expansive, as I just mentioned. You can see that temperatures are expected to be 15 to even 25 degrees below average for millions of Americans from the Central Plains all the way down to the southeast U.S., heading out of Sunday the 22nd into Monday, February 23rd. I'll break down exactly how cold you could get a little later in the video. For now, though, I do want to break down the incoming nor'easter for parts of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Let's start that discussion with a look at the winter storm alerts issued by the National Weather Service already on Saturday for the incoming system. The paler blue is a winter storm watch, meaning that there will likely be winter storm warnings eventually upgraded in these areas. If you're in the light blue, you already have a winter storm warning in place due to the very high confidence and significant winter weather impacts. West Virginia, much of the state, is under a winter storm warning right now. The same goes into far southwestern PA, and then again as you go towards the eastern part of the state. Due to slightly lower confidence in heavier totals in the central part of PA, that's why there's a winter storm watch there. The same goes into Baltimore and Washington, D.C., but just because it's still a watch and not a warning does not mean there will not be significant impacts in those zones. In fact, there likely will be. One thing I can tell you for sure, the northeast coast and the mid-Atlantic coast is really going to get slammed. You can see the winter storm warnings in eastern PA, southern New York, parts of western Massachusetts, and northern Connecticut. And then as you go closer to the coast from there, blizzard warnings. That means wind gusts upwards of 35 to 40 miles per hour will accompany snowfall that could total upwards of a foot. Yes, that includes the Philly suburbs, New York City, Providence, Rhode Island, Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts. Some very big population centers are in for this storm, and I think it's time that we time out the impacts that are likely on the way. Keep in mind as I play out the following timeline, this is just a general city-by-city overview of the general timelines you can expect with the snowfall and when travel could be the worst. This is not going to be perfect, but it should give you a good idea of the impacts you can expect. Let's start with a look at the impacts on the way as you go around the Appalachian chain as we go into tonight and into the early part of Sunday. Yeah, that's where the first winter storm warnings have been in effect for parts of Charleston, Elkins, and Morgantown in West Virginia. It will snow hard in those zones for several hours overnight tonight, even heading towards 4, 5, 6 in the morning on Sunday. Up into parts of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Williamsport, there could be some snow as the initial moisture begins pushing in as we go through the early to mid-morning hours of our Sunday. I do think winter storm warnings will end up being warranted over a good bit of Pennsylvania. And even as you go further south into some of the zones that are remaining watches or don't even have watches up quite yet. With that being said, let's take a look at how rain is expected to transition to snow to kick off this event, because temperatures are going to float around 35 degrees, possibly for a good part of the day on Sunday in some of these major metro areas. You see Richmond likely starting as rain, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Dover, Delaware, Philly, even up towards New York, possibly with some rain in the vicinity on Sunday morning getting into the middle of the day. This model certainly indicating it. Other models have been indicating that as we see low pressure initially forming right around this vicinity, we will kind of get a flow of some warmer air keeping the temperatures at bay. This initial setup of rain possibly mixing with snow in some zones all the way back into even central parts of Maryland and PA, that could really limit the potential for snowfall accumulation during the first few hours of this event. As the event continues to roll on, though, keep in mind where it is already starting to snow, that's where it is going to be coming down very heavily, especially as we go into the middle of the day, into the middle of the afternoon. So once it starts coming down hard and we start to see those temperatures crash down, it will begin to accumulate quickly, and you can see how snow is expected to spread and become the dominant precipitation type by the middle of the evening. This is a look at what could be occurring across much of the mid-Atlantic and southern New England coast by around 5 to 6 p.m. on our Sunday evening. Down to Richmond, possibly some heavier snow. That's why I think, even though you're on the edge of the winter storm watch there, you could end up with a winter storm warning for several inches of accumulation possible by the end of the event. One thing I can guarantee you, though, especially as you go north of Richmond towards Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, that is where there is a very good push of snow likely to end up forming over this area by the time the event is really kicking on up into the late day Sunday timeframe into the night. Look at this, closer to the coast, Salisbury, Maryland, Dover, Delaware, and eventual transition over to this very heavy snow likely, and this will be coming with gusty winds. The same will happen up into Philadelphia, New York City. Remember, there's blizzard warnings up in a lot of these zones. This means not only very heavy snow, but very heavy snow that's going to be even more blinding due to coming in at 40 to 50 miles per hour from the side with these very gusty winds. You can see Baltimore and Washington, D.C. possibly still amidst the snow and near blizzard conditions into the early morning hours of Monday. Philly, New York City, you'll likely still be in the depths of this system around the middle of the night, Sunday night, heading into Monday as well. And that's going to be the time when we also start to see Boston getting in on the first flakes of snow with some gusty winds. Springfield, Massachusetts, Hartford, Connecticut, Bridgeport out to Long Island, as well as all the way over to Cape Cod, possibly heavy snow picking up into the early part of Monday morning. This system is going to last quite a while. Once we see that snow kicking up, it is just going to continue and continue for hours over so many of these zones. Washington, D.C., you could still be on the edge of some snow even towards mid-morning on Monday. If that's what ends up happening, there could be upwards of a foot of snow in some of even the suburbs there. That's certainly something I'll talk about in more detail in just a moment. One thing you can definitely see on this timing, though, look at how the heavy snow will just be still cranking towards the New Jersey coast, Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, still extending up into Boston through not only the mid-morning, but even through the midday and beyond on Monday. This is where I'm expecting widespread foot to even foot and a half totals of snowfall. Could we even see 2 feet in some of these zones? That is certainly possible. And then eventually we'll start to get Maine and New Hampshire in on some of the heavier snowfall rates, especially as you go closer to the coast. As you head back towards the mid-Atlantic, I think things will be clear by the end of the day Monday, but this is, still likely going to be travel headache conditions with all the snow that's going to be all over the place, falling way too fast for plows through the day Monday and still on the ground by this point. You can see further northeast there will still be snow at 7 p.m. And of course you will want to be avoiding travel at all costs when it is snowing during this event at the minimum. Alright, let's get back into the details of this particular forecast though. I want to start with a look at the current projected snowfall totals for parts of the mid-Atlantic. And this is one of the zones that I think is still actually with the least confidence when it comes to numbers, due to the fact that there will be more of that rain mixing in at the beginning of the event here. One zone I can say for sure that you're going to get a good bit of snow, that's here in West Virginia initially with the event. From Beckley up to Elkins, points in between 6 to 12 inches of snow, possibly some locally higher amounts can be expected. The same will go into a good part of south central PA and eventually over towards the eastern part of the state. The zone I'm talking about that's in question, that's here, Northern Virginia, coming up into parts of Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland. The current forecast is 4 to 6 inches in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I think based on what the models are showing, we're going to end up with more in these zones in comparison to what this National Weather Service graphic is showing. Ultimately, though, all it takes is a few more hours of rain, and that could really drastically alter things. You want to be staying tuned for updates, especially there, and arguably even more further south. Richmond, this National Weather Service forecast is currently calling for an inch or two there. I would argue that with what some of these models are showing with the snow cranking out late Sunday into early Monday, you could get multiple inches of snow. The ultimate verdict is to be prepared in all of these zones for potentially significant winter weather impacts. Of course, as you go northeast of that zone I just talked about, this is where totals are even more confident in my opinion, as we're looking at a major snowstorm with a lot of zones getting a foot plus. Really anywhere from Williamsport and Sunbury, Harrisburg, York, and PA eastbound, I think there's a pretty good shot at about a foot of snow as indicated by all the pinks and then the transition to those greenish shades. Yes, Philly and Allentown, you're in on that potential. Trenton, New Jersey, Toms River, New Jersey, in on that potential for not just 12 to 18 inches of snow, possibly even some locally higher totals closer to 24 inches. You can see those brighter white shades indicating that potential in some of those zones. Up into New York City, the surrounding suburbs on the north side into northeast New Jersey, looking at likely a foot plus out of this storm unless the forecast changes. Same goes out into Long Island, the southern parts of the central New York vicinity, as well as into southern Connecticut. You're also looking at a possible foot of snow. The 12 to 18 inch totals don't stop back there. Moving up through a lot more of the northern part of Connecticut into Rhode Island, much of eastern Massachusetts, that's where at least a foot of snow is likely on the table. You can see even zones back towards Pittsfield there in Massachusetts, Albany, New York, far southern Vermont, and New Hampshire. At least 8 inches of snow can probably be expected, the midpoint of that 6 to 12 range. Then as we go further northeast, I think these totals are subject to increase a little bit more if confidence rises for the system to gray zones a little bit further inland. Right now, at least 4 inches of snow can be expected all the way as far inland as Augusta, Maine, and Dover, Foxcroft, and Maine. I'd argue, though, that even there we could end up with upwards of 6 to 12, like what the coast is expected to see. Ultimately, whether you are in the mid-Atlantic, stretching further up into the New England states, one thing I can tell you for sure, heavy snow and very gusty winds can be expected with the incoming blizzard. The snow totals are still subject to shift a little bit from what I just showed, so keep that in mind and stay tuned for the updates here and on that extra channel, which I'm linking down below. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications over there. With that being said, that's all I've got for the blizzard timing for now. Let's move on and talk about the temperature timing, because we've got the big cold blast that's going to impact so many zones on the way in the coming few days. Here's a look, first of all, at the high temperatures that have been happening on our Saturday afternoon here. Parts of the southern and the east coast regions of the U.S. have actually been quite mild for the time being. All the way up into the mid-Atlantic, highs have been near 50 today. That's why we're going to struggle with flirting with the freezing line initially with snow as it moves in into Sunday in some of those zones, of course. Back down towards the southwest, looking at 70-degree readings from Texas all the way to the Carolinas, even some record-breaking highs in the 80s closer to the Gulf Coast today. Overnight tonight, that's when cold air is going to start making a push southward, though. Look at this, all the way down to northern Louisiana, northern Mississippi. Temperatures will be of frost caliber in those zones. If you have any sensitive vegetation that you've gotten out mistakenly due to all of the warmer air over the last week in these zones, you might want to have a way to cover it up and protect it if it is sensitive to the cold. Further back up to the north of those zones, we're looking at teens and even some single digits for lows back up into the north central plains, and temperatures will remain cold in those zones all the way into Sunday afternoon. Look at this, eastern Montana, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, even in the Midwest, looking at 20s for highs on Sunday. Then you can see, again, look at this, we've got some mid and upper 30s for highs into parts of the southern New England states. It's going to take a little bit of that rain initially to transition things to snow in some of these zones, but it will happen, and it's going to be a very cold Sunday night in those zones, dropping all the way down into the 20s. Further back to the west, we're going to have 20s in the Ohio and the Tennessee Valley corridors on Monday morning. Back to the west of there, a widespread corridor of teens and single digits stretching through the plains, all the way back into the Mountain West as well. Even the lower elevations in the Mountain West dipping down into the 20s and the upper teens on a morning like Monday morning. Here we are looking at Monday afternoon, yet another cold one, especially in the eastern half of the country. East of this line, a lot of highs are going to be around 40 or below. As you go on up to the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, where there will be that fresh snowpack, of course. Temperatures not cracking freezing on Monday. Even as we go into Tuesday, look at the high temperatures, yet another cold one, especially as you go up into the Northeast U.S. There will be a bit of a rebound happening in the Central Plains by then, though. That's all I've got for this particular update. With that being said, let's go through the headlines recap of what I just discussed. Of course, a major blizzard is about to hit the East Coast, and the impacts will be further reaching than you might expect. Heavy snow, 6 to 18 inches worth, possibly even more in some locations, as well as very gusty winds upwards of 45 miles per hour. Those will wreak havoc in the combo that will happen in parts of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. The far-reaching impact from the blizzard and what's behind it, though, that's going to be the cool down, becoming a big part of the pattern with temperatures 10 to 20 degrees below normal for millions of folks. Of course, stay tuned right here on this channel and possibly that extra channel for the updates I will be posting. Make sure you have the subscribe button hit as well as the notification bell hit on One Nation Weather and then the ONW Plus channel that I have now made. If you want to check out model maps so you can track all of this winter weather yourself, use the Weather Bell free trial link I'll put down in the description of this video. With that being said, that's all I got in terms of reminders. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you. Stay safe out there.
One Nation Weather.